Imagine walking through the darkest streets of a city where the gas lamps barely reach the ground, where the fog is so thick you cannot see your own hands, where thousands of people live pressed together in small broken rooms, hungry, cold, and afraid. Now imagine that in this city, something is hunting, not an animal, not a disease, a person so careful, so intelligent, and so completely invisible that the most powerful police force in the world cannot find them. 5 women are murdered, each one more brutal than the last. The city falls into panic. The newspapers call him a monster. The police call him unsolvable. And over 130 years later, we still do not know who he was. This is the story of Jack the Ripper. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at history the same way again. To understand Jack the Ripper, you first need to understand the world he lived in. London in 1888 is the largest city on Earth. Nearly 5 million people live here. It is the capital of the most powerful empire in history, the British Empire. From the outside, it looks magnificent. Beautiful buildings, wide avenues, wealthy men in top hats, women in long, elegant dresses. But walk just a few streets away from that beauty, and you enter a completely different world, Whitechapel. Whitechapel is a neighborhood in the East End of London, and in 1888, it is one of the most desperate places in the entire city. Thousands of people, immigrants, workers, the poor, the sick, are packed into tiny rooms with no clean water, no heat, and no future. The streets smell like rot and sewage. Children work 12 hours a day in factories. Men drink to forget their pain. And women without money, without husbands, without support, are forced to do the only thing they can to survive. They sell themselves. For just a few coins, enough to pay for a bed for one night. These women are called unfortunates by the newspapers. They are ignored by the police. They are forgotten by society. They have names. They have stories. They have children who love them. And Jack the Ripper knows this. He knows they are alone. He knows they are vulnerable. And he chooses them. The police in 1888 are not prepared for what is coming. There is no DNA testing, no fingerprint science, no security cameras, no way to track a person across a city. All they have are witnesses and the fog. This is important because what happens next, the 5 murders known as the canonical Ripper murders, happens so fast, so suddenly, that the entire city is paralyzed with fear before anyone understands what they are dealing with. Before we talk about the killer, we need to talk about the women he murdered, because history has spent over a century obsessing over the monster, and it has almost completely forgotten the human beings he destroyed. Their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. 5 women, 5 lives, 5 stories that deserve to be told. Mary Ann Nichols, August 31st, 1888. Mary Ann Nichols is 43 years old. She has 5 children. Once, she had a husband and a home. But life broke her slowly. Alcohol, poverty, failed relationships, until she ended up on the streets of Whitechapel. On the night of August 30th, 1888, Mary Ann is seen walking on Flower and Dean Street. She is in a good mood. She has just bought herself a new bonnet, a small hat, and she shows it to her friends, laughing. "I'll soon get my DOS money," she says. "It means I'll find the money for my bed tonight." Those are the last words anyone hears her say. At 3:40 in the morning, a man named Charles Cross is walking to work through Bucks Row. When he sees something on the ground, he thinks it is a bundle of old clothes. He gets closer. It is Mary Ann. Her throat has been cut twice, so deeply that she is almost decapitated, and her body has been mutilated in ways that the newspapers refuse to describe in detail. The police arrive, the doctor examines her, and he says something that will haunt the investigation for years. This was not done by an ordinary man. The cuts are precise, surgical, made by someone who knows exactly what they are doing. The City of London has no idea what has just begun. Annie Chapman, September 8th, 1888, 8 days later. Annie Chapman is 47 years old. She makes small things, flowers, crochet work, and sells them for a few coins. She is known in Whitechapel as a friendly woman, kind. People like her. On the night of September 7th, Annie is sick. She has a bad cough and bruises on her face from a fight earlier that week. A friend tells her to go rest inside. Annie says she has no money for a bed. She needs to go out and find it. She goes out into the night. At 5:30 in the morning, her body is found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. The killer has not just murdered her. He has arranged her body, placed objects around her, like a display. The doctor who examines Annie Chapman is a man named George Baxter Phillips. He has been a surgeon for years. He has seen terrible things. But when he sees what was done to Annie Chapman, he refuses to describe it in public. He says only, "I have never seen anything like this in my professional experience." The city erupts in panic. Newspapers print the story on every front page. The words, "leather apron," start to appear. A mysterious figure seen in Whitechapel who frightens women. People are arrested, then released. Rumors spread like fire. And then, the killer goes silent. 2 weeks pass. 3 weeks. The police think it might be over. It is not over. September 30th, 1888. This is the night that breaks London completely. Because on this single night, Jack the Ripper kills twice. Elizabeth Stride is 44 years old. She was born in Sweden. She came to London looking for a better life. She never found it. But people who knew her said she was warm, funny, and never complained about her situation. At 1 in the morning, her body is found in Dutfield's yard. Her throat is cut, but unlike the other victims, her body is not mutilated. Why? Because the killer was interrupted. Someone walked into that yard, and the killer ran, but he does not stop. He does not go home. He does not hide. He walks through the dark streets of London and finds another victim. Catherine Eddowes is 46 years old. She has just been released from prison. She was arrested earlier that night for being drunk in the street. The police let her go at 1 in the morning. 45 minutes later, she is dead. Her body is found in Mitre Square. And what was done to her is so extreme, so precise, so deliberately horrifying that even experienced police officers have to look away. Part of her face has been cut. A piece of her clothing is missing. And nearby, in a dark doorway, police find a piece of that cloth. And above it, written in chalk on the wall, are these words: "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The police commissioner makes a decision that will be criticized forever. He orders the writing erased before it can be photographed, before anyone can study it. Why? He says he feared it would cause violence against Jewish immigrants in the area. But many investigators believe he destroyed the only piece of direct evidence the killer ever left behind, the writing on the wall, gone forever. And then comes Mary Jane Kelly. She is the last, the youngest, and by far the most brutally murdered of all the victims. Mary Jane is 25 years old. She is described by everyone who knew her as beautiful, young, and full of life. She sings Irish songs in the street. She dreams of leaving Whitechapel one day. Unlike the others, Mary Jane has a room, a small private room at 13 Miller's Court. This is different. This is not an outdoor attack in the early morning. This time, the killer goes inside. At 10:45 in the morning, in full daylight, her landlord sends someone to collect her rent. They knock on the door. No answer. They look through a broken window. What they see inside that room will give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. The murder of Mary Jane Kelly takes place over several hours. The killer had privacy. He had time. And what he did in that room is so extreme that the official police report is still partially sealed to this day. The police photographer takes pictures. The officers who enter the room are told never to speak publicly about what they saw. And then, the murders stop. Completely. No more victims. No more letters. No more evidence. Jack the Ripper disappears, as completely as if he had never existed. The investigation into the Jack the Ripper murders is one of the greatest failures in police history. And when you understand why it failed, it tells you something deeply uncomfortable about Victorian society. The Metropolitan Police in 1888 are completely unprepared. They have no experience with this type of killer. Serial murder, a person who kills multiple times with no obvious motive, is almost unknown to them. Their first instinct is to look for someone obvious, a foreigner, a madman, someone different. And this leads them to make mistake after mistake. The lead investigator is a man named Frederick Aberline. He is one of the most experienced detectives in London. He knows Whitechapel better than almost anyone, and he works this case with complete dedication, but he is fighting with both hands tied behind his back. The police have almost no physical evidence. The murders happen in dark alleys where there are no witnesses. The city is full of thousands of suspects, violent men, drifters, criminals of every kind, and the newspapers are making everything worse. The press in 1888 is obsessed with the Ripper case. Every day, new stories, new theories, new suspects. Letters pour into the police station, thousands of them, from people claiming to have information, or worse, claiming to be the killer. Most are fake, written by attention seekers and disturbed individuals. But two letters become legendary. The first is called the Dear Boss letter. It arrives on September 27, 1888, 3 days before the double event. It is written in red ink and signed Jack the Ripper. This is the first time that name appears anywhere. The letter mocks the police. It promises more murders. And it ends with a threat so specific that when the double event happens 3 days later, the police cannot ignore it. But here's the twist. Most serious investigators today believe this letter was written by a journalist, a reporter trying to create a better story, a man who gave the world's most famous killer his name. The second letter arrives with a small box. Inside the box is half of a preserved human kidney. The letter claims it came from Catherine Eddowes. Medical examination cannot confirm or deny this, but the police take it seriously. And still, nothing. No arrest, no solid suspect, no answer. Inside the police department, things are falling apart. Two separate police forces, the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police, are both investigating the murders, but they barely cooperate with each other. They are rivals. They hide information from each other. They argue about jurisdiction. The killer is somewhere in the city, and the two organizations that should be working together to catch him are competing against each other instead. Frederick Aberline will later say that he always believed the killer was someone completely normal, someone who blended in perfectly, someone who walked past police officers every day without raising any suspicion. He is right about that, but he never finds out who. Over 130 years, more than 500 different people have been named as Jack the Ripper. 500. Doctors, lawyers, royalty, artists, immigrants, police officers. The list of suspects reads like the guest list of a very disturbing dinner party. But there are a small number of suspects who keep appearing in serious investigations. People with real connections to the case. People who fit the evidence. Let me tell you about the most compelling ones. Suspect number 1, Montague John Druitt. Montague John Druitt is a 31-year-old lawyer and amateur cricket player. He is educated, respected, and completely unremarkable. And in December 1888, just weeks after the last murder, his body is found floating in the River Thames. He has drowned himself. In his pockets are stones. He has been dead for at least a month. Here is what is interesting. His own family believes he was responsible for the murders. His cousin says he was, quote, sexually insane, a Victorian phrase for someone with violent urges, and the timing of his death coincides almost perfectly with the end of the murders. When Druitt dies, the killings stop. Is this a coincidence? Or did the Ripper kill himself because he knew he was close to being caught? The problem with Druitt as a suspect is location. Records suggest he was playing cricket in other parts of England on some of the nights the murders occurred. But records in 1888 are unreliable, and cricket schedules can be faked. Druitt remains one of the most discussed suspects in the case, but we cannot prove it, and he cannot speak in his defense. Suspect number 2, Aaron Kosminski. Aaron Kosminski is a Polish-Jewish immigrant who works as a barber in Whitechapel. He lives just a short walk from where most of the murders took place. He is known to police as a dangerous lunatic. He has a deep hatred of women. He is eventually committed to a mental asylum where he spends the rest of his life. In 2014, a retired police officer named Russell Edwards makes a dramatic claim. He says he has a shawl, a piece of clothing, found near Catherine Eddowes' body. He says he tested DNA from the shawl and matched it to a descendant of Aaron Kosminski. The newspaper headlines explode. Jack the Ripper identified. Mystery solved after 126 years. But scientists are not so impressed. The DNA testing is heavily criticized. The chain of custody for the shawl is unclear. It was kept in a private family for over a century. Cross-contamination is possible. The scientific community largely rejects the conclusion. But Kosminski is still considered a strong suspect. And one piece of evidence is very interesting. A police official named Sir Melville Macnaghten writes a private memo in 1894. In it, he names 3 suspects. Kosminski is one of them. And a Macnaghten writes that one eyewitness positively identified Kosminski as a man seen with one of the victims. That witness refused to give formal testimony to the police. Why? Because the witness was Jewish. And Kosminski was Jewish. And in 1888, Whitechapel, a Jewish man would not testify against another Jewish man and risk causing violence against his entire community. One moment of solidarity, and a killer possibly walks free. Suspect number 3, Walter Sickert. Walter Sickert is a famous painter, a respected artist, a man who moves between London and the continent, painting scenes of working-class life. He is also one of the most controversial suspects in the entire case. The theory connecting Sickert to the Ripper murders was popularized in 2002 by crime novelist Patricia Cornwell. She spent millions of dollars, literally millions, buying Sickert's paintings, having them analyzed, searching for DNA evidence. And the connections she finds are unsettling. Several of Sickert's paintings show women in positions eerily similar to descriptions of the murder scenes. He paints dark Victorian rooms, vulnerable women, scenes of threat and power. He has detailed knowledge of Whitechapel. He visits the area frequently. And there are letters written to police and newspapers during the Ripper investigation that some analysts believe were written by Sickert, based on handwriting and writing style. But critics of the Sickert theory point out something important. Sickert was a painter of dark subjects. That was his style. He painted what Victorian society wanted to ignore: vulnerability, poverty, power. These were his themes. That does not make him a killer. Patricia Cornwell's investigation is widely criticized by criminologists. The DNA she finds is shared by thousands of people. The handwriting analysis is disputed. The Sickert theory is fascinating, but it is not proof. Suspect number 4. And now, the most explosive theory of all. What if the killer was connected to the British royal family? Prince Albert Victor is the grandson of Queen Victoria. He is second in line to the throne of England. The theory goes like this: Prince Albert Victor secretly married a working-class Catholic woman. This marriage was completely illegal and completely unacceptable to the royal family. The woman became pregnant and had a child. The women of Whitechapel knew about this. They knew the secret. And powerful men in the British government, men who would do anything to protect the monarchy, ordered them silenced. The murders in this theory were not the work of a madman. They were a government operation, a cover-up, performed by a royal physician named Sir William Gull. This theory has everything: royalty, conspiracy, power, betrayal. It is the perfect story, and almost certainly, it is not true. Historians have largely destroyed this theory. The key witness who first told the story was mentally unstable and gave contradictory accounts. Sir William Gull had suffered a stroke and was physically incapable of the murders. Prince Albert Victor has alibis for several of the murder nights, but the theory refuses to die because it speaks to something we want to believe: that crimes this terrible must be connected to power. That ordinary evil is not enough to explain extraordinary horror. Here is the uncomfortable truth about Jack the Ripper. We will probably never know who he was, not because the clues don't exist, but because 1888 was a world without the tools to find them. No DNA databases, no cameras, no digital records, no way to connect a person to a crime through science. The killer understood this world. He used it perfectly. He killed in darkness. He left almost nothing behind. And when he stopped, for whatever reason, he disappeared completely into history. But there's something else. Something that the Jack the Ripper story reveals about society that is more disturbing than the murders themselves. The women who were killed were ignored, not just by the killer, by everyone. When Mary Ann Nichols was found dead, the newspapers spent more time describing the cuts on her body than asking who she was, who her children were, or why she was on the streets in the first place. When Catherine Eddowes was killed, Police were more interested in the writing on the wall, and then erased it, than in understanding her life or finding justice for her. Mary Jane Kelly was 25 years old. She wanted to leave Whitechapel. She had dreams. No one asked about her dreams. The Jack the Ripper case became famous not because of the women who were killed, but because of the mystery of who killed them. The killer became the story. The victims became footnotes. And that tells us something very important about 1888. Poor women. Women without money, without power, without voices, were not worth protecting. They were not worth investigating. They were not worth justice. Jack the Ripper knew this. He chose his victims because of this. And in some ways, the century of obsession with who was the Ripper, rather than who were his victims, means that we are still making the same mistake. London has changed completely since 1888. Whitechapel today is unrecognizable. The fog is gone. The gas lamps are museum pieces. But Jack the Ripper's shadow is still there somehow. In the tours that walk his route every night, in the books and documentaries and films, in the endless debates about who he was, he got exactly what he wanted. He is remembered forever. And Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly, say their names, because they are the story. They were always the story, and the man in the fog is just a shadow. Before we finish today's story, let's look at 5 powerful words you heard in this video. These are real English words, used every day in history, news, and storytelling. Word number 1, vulnerable. Vulnerable is an adjective. If someone is vulnerable, they're in a position where they can easily be hurt or attacked. In our story, the women of Whitechapel were vulnerable because they had no protection and no one to defend them. Word number 2, mutilate. Mutilate is a verb. To mutilate means to damage or destroy a body in a very violent way. In our story, the killer mutilated the bodies, which shocked even the most experienced doctors in London. Word number 3, jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a noun. Jurisdiction is the official power or authority of an organization over a specific area or case. In our story, 2 police forces argued about jurisdiction instead of working together to catch the killer. Word number 4, conspiracy. Conspiracy is a noun. A conspiracy is a secret plan made by a group of people to do something harmful or illegal. In our story, some investigators believed the murders were part of a royal conspiracy to protect a dangerous secret. Word number 5, perpetrator. Perpetrator is a noun. A perpetrator is the person who commits a crime or a harmful act. In our story, the perpetrator was never identified despite one of the largest murder investigations in the history of London. And that is the story of Jack the Ripper. A city in darkness, 5 women whose names we must never forget, and a mystery that has never been solved. If you want to keep learning English through the most fascinating stories in history, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week, a new story, a new mystery, new words. History was never this interesting in school. See you next time.